can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. I'm here with Jim Schleckser of the CEO Project.com. I'm going to, formally introduce Jim in a second. Jim, I always like to mention other episodes people should check out on the podcast. And one of the most interesting ones is I had the co-founder of Pixar on. He talked of some Steve Jobs stories, some George Lucas stories. Amazing. He came out with a book, L.V. Ray Smith. And check that out. I had Todd Taskey on, actually, who Jim knows personally. And big shout out to Todd for introducing Jim. And Todd helps sell agencies. And he has a Second Bite podcast. So some of the people that he helps sell the company, they actually make more money on the Second Bite. And so check that episode out in Todd Taskey's podcast. And Nick Aracco, amazing guy. He's got a network of CHROs, CFOs, and which complements Jim's company with the Inc. CEO Project, which we'll talk about also. So check that out. He has some amazing advice for companies there. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And we do that by helping you run your podcast. For me, Jim, over a decade, I found no better way to give to my relationships than to profile the people and the companies I admire in my podcast. The number one thing in my life is relationships, and I always want to give to them. And a podcast is a platform that you can shout from the rooftops what that person is doing in their thought leadership. So if you thought about starting a podcast, you should. And if you have questions, go to rise25.com and we're happy to answer them. Both John and I have been doing it for over a decade, which in dog years is a long time, podcast years. So check it out. I am excited to introduce Jim Schleckser. He helps leaders grow their companies by helping them open their point of constraint, which is the kink in the hose. If you checked out his LinkedIn profile, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You can visualize that as a leader. What is the kink that is stopping the flow? And he most recently ran a technology business valued at $1.6 billion. He's done business in 40 countries. And he's the author of 2 best-selling books, Professional Drinking, which is not what you think it's about, and Great CEOs Are Lazy, which I listen to. It's fantastic. It's a must listen to. And he has run IncCEOProject.com for over 17 years. Jim, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Jeremy. I'm a little intimidated. I don't have any Steve Jobs stories, but I'll do my best.
You have, I'm sure, a lot of great stories itself. And I want to get into the book a little bit. Great CEOs Are Lazy. And one of my favorite books is The Goal, which you talk about in the book too. And I just want to start with effective CEOs. And what do effective CEOs do differently?
Yeah, effective. And we really built this model. I had read The Goal years ago and all of Goldrat's stuff, actually, but he never really fully deployed it to the concept of the system of a business. He had elements of it, but he never put it all together. And what I found as I was interviewing CEOs, and I probably interviewed 2,500 CEOs over time, is that there's a real distinct difference between how they spend their time in the business and the outcome that they get. And so the ones that were really performing at a very high level were working, 40, 50 hours a week, like normal. And the guys that were completely out of control were working like 80. And it was an early question in our interview process. And I said, well, what's the difference between these two groups? One guy's busting his hump and the other isn't. And yet the one that's not working that hard is getting a better outcome. So why? And the answer is it lies in Goldrat. It lies in the point of constraint. The really good CEOs, the effective CEOs, do 2 things. They find the kink and they fix it. And then they go, all right, let me relook at it and find it. And the analogy of garden hose is appropriate here. If you have a garden hose and I'm trying to get flow rate out the end, water, and it kinks, you can do work anywhere on that hose, but the only place that the work is useful, effective work, is at the kink. Same thing's true in your business. Somewhere in your business, there is a kink, a point of constraint that stops you from getting the revenue you want, serving the people you want, getting the relationships you want, making the profit you want. Depends on what it is. And your job as a leader is find the kink and fix it. And everything else you do is non-value added. And so the smart ones go, well, since it's non-value added, I'll spend almost no time on it, and I'll spend most of my time on that.
Do you find that some of the CEOs have a hard time delegating? Like what's causing them to not look at the kinks? Is it just the awareness, or are there other things that are causing them not to be able to focus in on that?
Yeah. So there's two questions inside there. One is the kink and the awareness of it. And what we find in our conversations that about half the CEOs know where the kink in their business is. So half don't think like this. This is not their mental model. And they don't even know where the kink is, even when probed to try to find it. And then of the half that know where it is, and this is the funniest thing, Jeremy, you go, so, okay, the kink is X. How much time do you spend on that? And they go, well, none. I'm like, anybody think that's a problem? So only about half of the half actually spend, let's say 25, 30% at the point of constraint, trying to open it up going forward. So literally, if you just regularly find the kink and fix the kink, you're in the top 25% of all CEOs, just like that. With regard to the delegation, that's a little different conversation. And I think that's about standards. So when I look at somebody doing a job, they map themselves into that job. And they go, if I did that job, it would look like this. And, look, CEOs are special people. They have extraordinary capabilities at something, or they wouldn't be in the job. And it is not fair to compare myself to somebody working from, because otherwise they'd be the CEO, right? And so we have a rule we call the 70% rule for delegation. So if somebody is 70% as good as you at the job, delegate it. Delegate it immediately. And now they go, oh my God, that's scary. I go, whoa. There are levels of delegation. A very low level of delegation might be, hey, Jeremy, go check this out, see what you think, come back and talk to me. We'll figure out what to do. A more advanced level might be, hey, Jeremy, go check this out, figure out what you want to do, send me a note. And if I don't say anything, just go do it. So give me the chance to say, hey, no, don't do it like that. And the highest level is, hey, Jeremy, take this. And I don't even want to know what you did.
Figure it out.
Deal with it, right? And everybody thinks when I say delegation, they think that. But no. There are like training wheels and like tricycle. There's levels of delegation. And so 70% to a low level of delegation gets it off my plate and saves me a ton of time. But it's not all the way to I'll never see it again, which scares a lot of CEOs. So I think delegation sits in the I'm afraid of handing it off. They're not as good as I am. So set the standard 70, and that enables you to give it at least the beginning level and over time to higher levels of delegation.
Jim, I like how you unpacked, you kind of have two different camps. Like one is they know where the kink is, and one is they don't know where the kink is. Yeah. And without naming names or companies, is there a person or company you could think of where they said, Jim, I don't know where the kink is? And how did you walk them through the thought process of finding that kink?
Yeah, and I talk in the book about how some questions to ask to find the kink, but I'll give you the example. I talk in the book about 5 hats, and this isn't in the book. This is sort of bonus material that you're about to get. So my thinking is advanced. And there's 2 hats, which I call player and learner or analyst. And it turns out that player and analyst or learner are the find the kink hats to wear. So when I want to figure out where the kink is, I need to either go into player mode or learner mode to find it. So the example is we had a CEO that had a cake manufacturing business up in Canada, and he wasn't getting the throughput he wanted off his factory floor. He knew that, but he didn't know why. So he went down and he worked on the floor for a couple of days and talked to people and went into player mode and learner mode. He was doing both, right? And by the end of the week, he knew where the problem was, right? And he knew how to fix it. So he goes back to his office and begins to fix the kink with some other hats that we can talk about later. So, a lot of CEOs go into player mode, like to go get a sale, right? And you hear of big CEOs jumping in on sales, and that's great, but it doesn't enhance organizational muscle if I go in and do. But if I go in and while I'm doing meta work. And the meta work while I'm in the sales mode is, do I have the right offer? Do I have the right team? Are they supported by the right system? Should I change my pricing? Like all those business model-y other kinds of questions. So then when you back out of player mode, you can then go deal with some of the things that you learned while in player mode. That works a little better for the extroverts. The introverts go, let me look at spreadsheets, let me analyze reports, let me stay. Perfectly valid, by the way. Like they both work. So it's a little bit of personal technique. But so player and analyst allow you to find the kink.
Yeah.
So that's
how I can tell
they do it.
Yeah. That's how I can tell I'm an extrovert. When you were explaining that, I'm thinking that's what I would just dive in. I'm not going to be looking at a spreadsheet or something like that. And yeah, that's really interesting to think about. And you apply those learnings to the process. So you go back and improve the process and not just do it. But I love that. Talk about the hats.
Yeah.
And by the way, I encourage anyone, there's a great talk that Jim gave. And he actually puts on the hats in this talk. So
yeah, it's a little kitschy, but hey, it works, right? You remember it.
I remember it exactly.
So there's 5 hats that great CEOs wear as they think about this: find the kink and fix the kink. And I talked about the first 2, player and learner. Those are the find the kink hats. The other 3 are the areas in which the kink exists, and it either exists in your business model, is stopping you from getting where you want to get. The talent you have in your business is stopping you from getting where you want to get, or the processes and systems you use to run the business is stopping you. And so we've named those as hats. If you're dealing with the business model, it's called the architect hat. So I'm architecting my business. I'm building a business that has longevity and profit. And I'm going to tell you that you almost can't spend enough time on this. A better business model wins. Netflix in the early days of Blockbuster, just to pick on, like, it was just a better business model. You'd be insane to continue working with Blockbuster after you've learned about the Netflix business model. And so they came up with a better, and they just dominated the industry. And you've seen that time and time again. They come up with a better model and they win. So more time on business model is super important. And let me just, if I had to pick one thing to focus on in business model, it's recurring revenue. You cannot have enough recurring revenue in your business. It is easier to finance. It's easier to grow. It's easier to manage. And when you sell it, you're going to make a lot more money on your business. And I can get into why, but recurring revenue is the number one business model thing while you're in architect hat that you can imagine. The second one is coach. And coach is all about talent. This is get the right people on the team, coach the people that are on the team. If people's not performing, then get them off the team or move them to a different position. All about talent, all in. And, once again, you've heard some stuff about get the right people on the bus and all that jazz. That's all in the talent space. And then the third is processes and systems. And when we talk about processes and systems, there are 3 elements that we think about in processes and systems. One is your values, which helps people, and come back to why that's important. Your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, are how we do things. You could almost think about SOPs as human software. How are humans supposed to respond in a particular defined scenario? And then IT. Normally, when I say processes and systems, people think IT, and I'm like, no, that's just a piece of the equation, and that's data and highly repeatable. And so if we've got IT for data and we've got SOPs for humans, why do we need values? And the answer is, and why is it part of my systems and processes? And the answer is, how do I know when somebody comes into a scenario that is not predicted that they'll make the right decision? The decision you would make, more or less, let's say, right? And you go, if I've got the right values, they go, well, we always treat customers are always first. We're always ethical. We always, that guides there's no rules for me to how to handle this scenario. So I use the values to decide what to do. So that's processes and systems. And that we call the engineer hat when I'm dealing with engineering processes and engineering systems in my business. And, it's profoundly unsexy, Jeremy. Entrepreneurs don't like to spend time on systems. They just don't. it doesn't make me any more money. It doesn't sell any more product. It's just so unsexy. But
it's sexy because they could sleep at night and not worry as much, right?
And it allows you to grow a bigger business without just adding people. Normally, the model when we're early is they go, oh, it's a problem. Throw people at it. Well, throw people at it works to a level, and then throw people at it doesn't work anymore. And you need to build a system so that I can do more with not more people. And that's, by the way, how you build a business that can scale and make money at the same time.
Yeah. So architect, coach, engineer, player, learner.
That's it.
Got it.
Those are the 5, and two to find the kink, and 3 to fix the kink. Because what I go learn from analyst or player is I got a talent problem, coach. I've got a business model problem, architect. I've got a systematic problem, engineer.
You mentioned process, and there was one particular company in the call center space. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So this is a firm, we consider it one of our successes. They were in the call center space, so near shore call centers. And, when we started working with them, they were probably $5 million, making almost no money, and a couple of partners that weren't really contributing at a very high level. And they were trying to start up another business that was not particularly related. So the first one was about focus. And there's a phrase we use, which is focus equals growth. And there's a little bit there of people, they say, what defines me is what I do. And we say, no, what defines you is what you don't do. So when you say no to something, that defines you as an organization. So we got them to say no to this other business. That was one. So I'm now 100% focused on the call center business. I live or die on this business. That was one. And then, began to work on the underlying talent in the business, upgrading the talent with them, helping them identify where the talent gaps were, and then adding and growing. And then the methodologies they used were not delivering the results they wanted, helping identify them and help them figure out how to improve the systems that they had to go to the next level. We later, just on sort of more the talent side, and writ large, we helped them move those 2 partners out because they really weren't contributing. And so now the guy we're working with owns the whole business, has got the right people around the table. He's now elevated what he works on. He's not down in the business anymore. So he's not in player mode at all. He has people doing all of those jobs, and the business is growing like heck. I mean, I think last year they ended $55 million and making a big pile of money 7 years later. So 10X in 7 years, which is pretty, I'd sign up for that. Anybody would, right? And it was all about finding the kink and opening it up over time, and just the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one.
Yeah, I love what you said about what do you not do, because it really allows you to focus in. So talk to people a little about the Inc. CEO project. When, obviously it's for CEOs. When a CEO is like, yeah, this sounds great, Jim, how does it work? Talk a little about that.
So we do CEO peer groups combined with one-on-one advisory work. So we'll put with a CEO, we'll put them in a group, a curated group of other companies their size and their complexity. That's unique. There are other peer group companies out there, but they tend to be heterogeneous and just whoever's in your town that said yes to joining the group. And so you could be a $40 million software company and you're with a $2 million dry cleaner and a $5 million scrapyard. And, those problems that they have, you had so long ago, you've forgotten about them. And maybe you never had them. And they really can't relate to what you're doing. It's a very different business. So we try to build a curated CEO peer group, right? Same size, same complexity, that will understand and be able to help you with the business. Non-competitive though. So that's one. Very, very, and growth oriented. As I said, we're affiliated with Inc. magazine. So we're growth oriented. That's where we specialize. The second is we have a very rigorous methodology designed to, when we come together in a CEO peer group, A, to hold ourselves accountable with a scorecard, and then B, to identify the point of constraint and do a group processing methodology to really dig deep on that point of constraint and give you immediate feedback from, we have 7 or 8 in a group normally, 7 other really smart CEOs giving you feedback. Almost always you have a breakthrough idea that goes, I never thought about it that way. And boom, that just solved my problem. And they go back home and they fix it immediately. But the other thing that's profound in it is because there's 7 other really capable CEOs around the table, you have other leaders that you can model their behavior. I learned how Jeremy handled this or Jim handled this, and I can steal some of their good ideas and bring them back to my business. And that multi-tracks your CEO experience and therefore gets you better faster if you just had a single track, which is your own business. And then the third element is all of our advisors are former CEOs. We've all run companies at scale. So, most other peer groups don't do that. That means when we understand your business and comment, it generally comes from a place of experience. Not that you have to do what we said, but we're probably not totally wrong, because we've probably experienced it at one point or another. So if you want to be in a group of like size, like complexity companies with a very sophisticated leader giving you very direct feedback on the most critical issues on your business. I mean, there's a lot of time in the barrel here where your business is being worked on. That looks like us. And compared to most that are out there, if you characterize them as business 101, smaller companies, bringing in a speaker to give you like, here's how you do stock options, or most of our clients are beyond that. And they're a little bigger and a little more sophisticated. And that's what the business we designed for that kind of client.
Jim, like what's the low range of like maybe staff or something? Like who's a good fit for the Inc. CEO project?
Yeah, we dipped down to about $20 million of revenue. Anything above $20 million, we can be very, very useful and impactful. If they're, and I think the issue is that if you're below $20 million, you're always got the title of CEO meaning whatever you started the business doing, engineering, marketing, sales, accounting, whatever your thing was, at 20 million, you're probably still doing that and holding the CEO title. And so the first thing we usually do is try to get you out of that functional role and just doing the CEO job. But if you're at $5 million and I go, okay, we're going to move you out of the sales role, you go, tell me how that works because I got nobody else, right? And so I can't help that individual as much as I can somebody who's ready for that transition. And then we help them really become a super effective CEO as they go 20, 40, 60, like the guy I talked about.
Yeah, I've not seen any better way to have breakthroughs than to be in a group of like-minded people. Not only, like you said, modeling, looking at what people are doing, but like just people see blind spots that are so obvious to them that is people are too much in it to even see some of the stuff, I find.
One of the funniest pieces of feedback we had was there's one guy who was as random as a human being can be, right? Just he was all over the map as a CEO. And he was giving feedback to another CEO, goes, Bob, you got to focus, man. You got to pick one thing and really work on it. And I go, do you hear yourself talking here? But you're right. It's easy to see it in other people. And sometimes we can't see it in ourselves.
There was another situation, Jim, government IT company.
Yeah. And this one's all about business model. We really help them transform their business model. This was a highly transactional government IT business selling hardware and so forth and software. So they'd make a little margin as they sold it across, about $150 million, making $1 million or $2 million bucks. Not a lot of money for an awful lot of effort, frankly. And over a number of years, we're able to help him transform that business by modifications to the business model. And frankly, when you change the business model, sometimes you need to change the people as well. So some people changed as a consequence of the business model changes. Flash forward, it's about a decade, but he's now just a little bit bigger in revenue. And it's all about changing the business model, maybe $200 million of revenue, but he probably makes $65 million a year. So dramatic, just change the guy's
Huge
life,
difference.
change the life of everybody in the company. And as I said, you can't spend too much time on business model. He really didn't. That's the only thing he changed. Now, all the ripple from that change occurred, about the systems need to change and the talent need to change a bit. Now, I was actually just yesterday talking to a CEO about moving from a very transactional sale to more of a relational sale. And he's like, oh, this is great. I can grow my relationship with my customers. I can solve real problems. And I go, all good, except you're probably gonna have to fire all your salespeople. That's what are you talking about? I said, if you're a transactional salesperson, some can make the change to being a relational, solutions-oriented salesperson. Some can't. And that's what I mean by a fundamental change in strategy sometimes means a change in the people that have to be in the business.
When you differentiate those, is that in the follow-up afterwards, or what, are they selling something a little bit different when you talk about the transactional versus the relational sale? Is there an example that would be, okay, here's how the transactional type of sale would go, and then is the product the same, or is the product offering a little bit different in that situation?
Yeah. So I'll talk about him in a minute, but there are really three bases of competition that are available to you. And this goes back, I didn't come up with this, and I'm struggling to remember the name of who did, but it's not Porter. But you can either be, it might be Porter actually. You can either be a cost competitor, you can be the cheapest, but you need scale to be the cost competitor. Southwest is a cost competitor. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Every plane's the same. The flight attendants start cleaning the plane before you get off it. That's all to get the plane back in the air as fast as they can, making money. You can be a customer intimate competitor, meaning I wrap myself around the customer in a way that I will solve any problem they have, any pain point they have. I want to make it go away. And I am burrowed into those customers. Nipro is an example of that. Ritz-Carlton's an example of that. And then there's an innovation competitor. We've always got the cool stuff. We've always got the leading edge. If you want the latest, coolest, most innovative product, you come to us. That's Apple, that's 3M, that's, and those are the guys spending 20% of revenue on R&D, right? That's what you have to do to be that kind of competitor. So this particular guy I was talking to was in steel distribution, and a very cost-driven market. Like, you make very thin margins, and he had grown it to a very large size. It's like, I'm a little worried about where the business I'm in is going, and this cost-based competition that I'm in, I'm not the biggest. I don't think I can win long-term. He was right. So his idea, I said, I need to wrap myself around the customer and sell them kind of everything that they do, but not only help them with what they buy in, and it's mostly materials, but help them dispose of those materials, because right now they just sell them and it's your problem. But they do need to get rid of some of that stuff. And he said, I'm going to wrap myself around. I'll help them get what they need and help get rid of what they don't need. And I'm going to solve the problem for my customers in a significant way. Well, that's a whole different basis of competition. That's going to a competitor and saying, or customer and saying, hey, help me understand where your pain points are. Help me understand a problem you can't get solved, and let me help you solve it. What's beautiful about that is if you've got a problem that's costing you $50 million a year, and I can solve it for 25, you go, awesome, make it go away. I just saved $25 million, right? Now, what it cost me to do that is irrelevant. It's no longer cost-based competition, right? Versus, I bought steel from you. I know the market price of steel. I'll let you make 5%. And why would I make you make more? Because I can buy it from the next guy for the same price. And so the whole idea of moving to relational selling changes his profit, changes his model. But a guy that's used to, hey, Bob, I got steel. It's $10 a pet. Blah, blah, blah. Hey, Bob, New York, sell. Chicago, buy. If I say, go talk to them, understand their problems, some can make the transition and some can't. So that's what I mean by.
I love that. Yeah, because it's almost taking a commodity. Like, a lot of people can be viewed as a commodity. Even services could be viewed as a commodity, and becoming not a transactional, but relational. I love that.
And look, Jeremy, you're a relational sales organization, right? You go, look, this particular problem, if you've got it, we know how to solve it better than you do, way better than you do. And so work with us, because it's better, cheaper, faster, higher value than any other option that you might have around. That's not a cost-based sale. That's a relational sale. That's a customer intimacy sale.
Totally.
Yeah.
I want to dig deep on the business model piece, because you're like, that's the number one thing. You talk about this in the book too. And one of the things you talk about is subscription. You kind of compared, I think it was like Ford to Netflix and their revenue, but what their actual value is because of that. So I want to dig deeper on that. And if there's any other things people should be thinking about outside of just subscription when they're thinking of business model.
Yeah, certainly. And those numbers have probably changed, because I wrote the book a few years ago, but at the time,
the concept's the same.
Ford was selling for, 75%. The full enterprise value of Ford was about 75 cents on the dollar for every dollar of revenue in a transactional model. Sell a car, see you in 7 years, we'll sell you another car maybe, as opposed to Netflix, which is a subscription model. And they were selling for sort of 7 times revenue. So they were getting $7 of enterprise value for every dollar of revenue. And that was the sort of valuation comment. But maybe a couple of other things to think about in terms of business model. One is capital intensity, which is how much capital do I need to run this business? And the example I use in the book is actually another steel distribution company that we worked with. And he had a massive amount of inventory to sell into his customers. And it was a pretty thin margin product. And I'll get the margin in a minute as well. And so he couldn't self-finance his growth with his profit. In other words, every time he went and got another whack of growth, $50 million, $100 million, he needed to go buy $25 million of inventory to support that $50 million of growth, which meant he had to go out to the market to raise debt or equity. And he was in this constant like, yay, I got growth. Oh, I got to go raise more money. It's like horrible cycle to be in, right? So imagine if his business didn't require any inventory, just for the second. Hey, I got more revenue. Awesome, right? I don't need more capital. I can just self-fund it and off we go. So asset intensity built, and you don't want to have a capital intensive business, or you're going to be constantly in this model of get revenue, go raise money, get money, so forth. So that's one thing to think about. Decrease the capital intensity of your business is always a good move. Better never design a business that needs capital, right? Like your business requires almost no capital, as does mine. You know, I do professional consulting. That's the good news in this particular model. The second one is margin and, you know, gross margin. So cost to deliver the service or product subtracted from the revenue I generate on that product. And, you know, we talk about, unless you've got at least 50% gross margin, you don't have an interesting business. The steel company I talked about was at about 15%. And you saw what happened. He just didn't have the cash to do freedom of action to do what he needed to grow his business. If his margin was 50%, he might have actually been able to self-finance that business. But because it was a cost-based competitor, back to our prior conversation, that was not available in this market. And so he was stuck with the model he had. I actually argued he should have transformed that business to a service model and said, look, we're not going to hold inventory, but we'll manage your supply chain for you. And he goes from being a $400 or $500 million business selling a lot of steel to a 30 or 40 or $50 million business, but he probably make 20 or $30 million a year on his $50 million business because there's no asset, there's only a few people, it's all intellectual property. It's a better but smaller business. And so capital intensity, margin, and recurring revenue would be the three things. But I had to pick one, it's recurring revenue. I talked about subscription. I'll give you just, and the other one though is long contract periods. So part of the reason why people like, for example, government contracts companies is they generally get 5-year contracts. And, you know, their margin isn't super incredible, but they got a 5-year contract. And there's like an 86% probability that you're able to renew based on the grand average. So high probability of it continuing, long visibility on my revenue. And, you know, my joke goes, why do people like recurring revenue? Why do buyers like recurring revenue? And the joke is because the 26-year-old MBA that's going to put it in a spreadsheet can actually model it up and make it all make sense. And if I don't have recurring revenue, they go, well, what do I put for next year's revenue? And you go, I don't know, about what we did last year, maybe a little more. Their heads explode, right? But if I say, well, historically, we renew 97% of everybody we worked with, and then we usually add another 10 or 15 or 20 or 30%. And here's the last 3 years I did that. So that's the number you should do. They go, awesome. I can put that in my spreadsheet, and off they go. So it's a bit of a joke, but it is predictable. And as an investable asset, as like a private equity group or something, they love businesses like that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. My last question will be your favorite books. Okay. But before I get to that, I'll give you a chance to just think on that, because I know you have a treasure trove besides your own book, Great CEOs Are Lazy and Professional Drinking. You have, you're a constant learner, and I'd love to hear that. But I want to dig deep on one thing you said. You know, when you talk about the relation, you said to the person, you're going to have to find new salespeople, right? And when we're talking about a relational salesperson,
I said May.
May,
So
okay.
some could make it.
Right. May. So whether it's training, but let's say the person did need new salespeople because of the mindset of the transactional salesperson. What are some of the characteristics you would tell that person to look for in that relational salesperson when they're hiring a new team?
And by the way, I would try to keep the people I had first because it's the devil, So can we educate them? Can we move them? Before we go to let's go find new ones? So just so people don't think I have a cold, dead heart, There's a book that we recommend called Who. It's by G.H. Smart, and he wrote Top Grading as well. Actually, the father wrote Top Grading. This is by the son. And the number one predictor of success in the future is success in the past. And so if I was looking for somebody who knew how to who was going to be a relational salesperson, a solutions-oriented salesperson, I would look for people, hang on to your hat, who had been previously successful as solutions-oriented salespeople. So I would not look for the traditional transactional salespeople and hope I found the golden unicorn that I could turn into one. I go, forget it. I'll just find somebody who's done this and knows how to do it, because the probability they'll be successful is higher than any other option I would have. That sounds stupid simple, but I use this line when I talk about, how do you build a culture? You build people that work in the culture. When you fly on Southwest, everybody's kind of happy and likes people. You know why? Because they hire people that are happy and like people. It's like really simple. Like there's no corporate policy manual saying you will like people. Like I just hire people that like
Hire to
people.
your values.
That's it. Same exact thing here. I want a relational salesperson. I want a solutions-oriented win-win salesperson. I hire somebody with that mentality.
Love it. That goes in, you transition perfectly into books. Top Grading, a big shout out to Chris Marceau, who I know, who is CEO at Top Grading. He actually doesn't live too far from me.
Yeah,
and they have a great podcast, so check it out. What are some of your favorite books of all time?
Yeah, and when you get asked this, you got to, so well, who's your favorite child, right? but I'll give a go on a couple. And tell me when to stop, because I'll
keep going. I could listen to it all day.
Okay.
I have Audible credits, so give me some.
Yeah, right. Beyond Great CEOs Are Lazy and Professional Drinking, but actually, I don't think those are the best books ever. They're decent, but Think and Grow Rich. It's an old book, but Napoleon Hill, love it. It's now actually probably not on Audible because it's out of copyright. Dale Carnegie, but not How to Win Friends and Influence People. He wrote a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It's a sort of a less popular book. Awesome book. And gosh dang it, if everybody read the book and lived it, the world would be a pretty cool place, actually. There was a book called Profit Patterns by a guy named Zlotny, I think the name was, and a co-author. And this was really where I started thinking about business models as a younger guy. Like, wow, there are designs of businesses that are more profitable than other designs of businesses. And to be really thoughtful about that matters. So that Profit Patterns is really quite good. Who, as I indicated, we recommend that book all the time. Awesome book. Let's see here. Recently, I've been recommending a book called Necessary Endings. And it's sort of, don't let your wife see when you bring this into the house, but it's about that everything has a season and endings happen, and endings are okay because they open up capacity for something new to happen, which is a beautiful thing. And, we've seen like that CEO I talked about with the partners, I made him read that book. He came back from reading that book and he goes, all right, let's get this done. That it just changes. And that's happened more than one time. It makes it okay to end something, which is sometimes you need to hear that. That's a really powerful book. And then I'll just pick on one. Like I said, I could go forever on this, but Radical Candor is another good book. And I'm struggling to remember the woman's name who wrote it. Kim Scott, maybe. It talks about the idea that classic consulting grid, right, of directness and compassion. And if I'm highly direct with no compassion, I'm a jerk, right? Not being direct is it's like ambivalence, right? I tell people when I give you feedback, I give it to you because I love you, because the opposite of love is not hate, it's ambivalence. And so not giving people feedback is like abusive, to not tell them they're not doing well. So the golden spot, according to her, is radical candor, which is directness from a place of compassion. And I think that's just a really profound, and more people could stand to sit in that quadrant versus some of the other ones that they tend to sit in. And see if I can come. And Ayn Rand, I read a bunch of Ayn Rand, and it was influential to me in it is okay to celebrate human achievement. I don't buy everything Ayn Rand said, but the idea that humans and their creative ability are super profound and appropriate to be celebrated and the collective, I'm not all the way with her, but the collective has its issues. And some of the things I see in current politics echo some Randian stuff. So, but that's been an influential book as well. So I'll stop. I can keep going.
I love it.
I'm a big reader. So
I love it. No, I love this. And just thank you. Thanks for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. And I want to encourage people to go to inkceoproject.com. That's INCceoproject.com. Are there any other places online we should point people towards to check out?
Yeah, you can find us on LinkedIn, where a lot of business people, if we have a group that's pretty active, or you just follow me or follow our organization, you'll get some of our content. I do have a column on ink.com that publishes every Tuesday morning. I've been doing that for about 8 years, so there's hundreds of articles. And then if you're if you're a Twitter person, Ink CEO Project on Twitter, you can follow us there, and we put most of our stuff out there as well.
Love it. I want to be the first one, Jim. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and keep watching.
Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100 grand.